In 1762, Peter III rose to the throne of Russia. Much like his grandfather, Peter the Great, he had ambitious plans for reform. He abolished the secret police, declared religious tolerance, and tried to introduce military and educational reforms. Within 6 months, though, he had lost his throne and he had lost his life. Unlike his grandfather, Peter III had failed to control his soldiers. The more history you read, the more you realize that before the modern era, keeping the military happy was the most important thing a leader could do. This is what most of Roman history is about. If an emperor managed the military successfully, he could have a larger impact. If he didn't, his guards would soon kill him and choose a new emperor. This dynamic isn't limited to the Western world. You can see it everywhere. Military governments almost always impose horrific costs on the common people. One of the greatest things about modern life is the way that we've mostly moved beyond this. When one ruler is in charge, he can easily be intimidated or pushed around by the soldiers who protect him, especially if that military has been successful. In a system where the people are in charge, that just doesn't work. One of the proudest moments in United States history has to be the fall of General Douglas MacArthur. That larger-than-life Army general was widely regarded as one of the men who won World War II. He had ruled occupied Japan like an emperor and knew how to play the media like a fiddle. In 1951, MacArthur started running the Korean War the way he wanted to, and telling his civilian bosses they were getting it wrong. President Truman fired him. In a society with multiple centers of power, the soldiers can't run things the way they used to, unless of course we let them. It would require an incredibly complex system of control. It doesn't exist yet, but my paranoid mind can see the pieces begin to fall into place over the next century. You can see what will go into it. A lot of fear, new and more intrusive technologies, maybe some over-marketed threats from abroad. All of these forces are right now working to combine more power in the hands of the United States president. Washington, D.C.'s endless warriors should think a bit harder about those Roman emperors. They should think a little bit harder about Peter III. The more powerful a president is, the more vulnerable he is to those around him. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.
Our only comfort is that the terrorists will probably turn the clock back only 200 years rather than 5,000. For what we now fear is not so much the death and suffering that their infernal machines can cause, but the loss of liberty that will come about as a result of Western governments' reactions to terrorist attack. We now worry not about the end of civilization, but rather about the end of various socio-political institutions that emerged in Europe and North America in the wake of the bourgeois revolution. The widespread suspicion that the war on terrorism is potentially more dangerous than terrorism itself seems to me entirely justified. Those who bear the responsibility for preventing further attacks will think it necessary to take steps that might well lead to the end of the rule of law and to the role of public opinion in determining government policy. Politicians and bureaucrats will outdo each other in claims of toughness by proposing more and more outrageous measures. The rage felt when immense suffering is caused by human agency rather than by natural causes will lead the public to accept those measures. The result will not be a fascist putsch, but rather a cascade of decisions that will gradually, in the course of a few years, bring about an irreversible change in the conditions of social life in the West. The courts will be brushed aside and the judiciary will lose its independence. Regional military commanders will be given the kind of authority that once belonged to locally elected officials. The media will be coerced into suppressing protest against these changes. Fear of such developments is of course commoner among Americans like myself than among Europeans, for it's only in America that a permanent state of war has been proclaimed by the government. I do not think the Bush administration is filled with power-hungry crypto-fascists. Neither are the German or the Spanish or the British governments. But I do think that the end of the rule of law could come about almost inadvertently in both the US and Europe through the sheer momentum of the institutional changes that are likely to be made in the name of waging war on terrorism.